Hey everyone, nice to meet you. So I'm Jason, and then I have also Kishore. Here we're co-founders and authors of Typesense, and it's actually one of our first calls where we're talking about Typesense's roadmap publicly. We've been asked for it a couple of times over these years, and in our case, since the roadmap keeps changing dynamically, it's been hard to pin down what the roadmap looks like even a couple of months out, which is why we've been putting it off. But then we finally found some time, and I think we'll be consistent about maintaining the roadmap going forward. So we'll also be sharing it on GitHub. So we use GitHub projects to put it together. So we'll also keep it up to date as we're planning roadmap as we go forward. So the way we'll do this particular event is that we'll first talk about how we plan the roadmap. I think that should give you some context into why certain things are not there and why certain things are there in the roadmap, and also how often the roadmap changes and things like that. And then we'll jump into what features are going to ship in the upcoming release in v0.22, and then we'll talk about what some key features in 0.23. And then finally, we'll have someone who has integrated with Typesense user, talk about how their experience was, what are the features that they're using, etc. So, all right. So this is a roadmap. So if you go to our main Typesense core project, you should see it under the projects tab, and you should now see a Typesense public roadmap tab here. So the key thing, so we can read through this, how we plan our roadmap, etc. But I wanted to highlight this. So we do what's called just-in-time planning. So we probably plan maybe 2 months in advance, and even within that window, we tend to constantly or regularly groom the backlog and reprioritize things based on how our user feedback is. So that's one key thing. Why the roadmap changes often is if we hear feedback about certain things, then we adjust dynamically as we go along. So, which is why we also don't plan more than 2 months in advance, because things could change dramatically. So I would call this a feature in that we respond in real time to feedback that we're getting. And in terms of how we prioritize, so we first look at, of course, we offer a prioritized support for users, for paying users. So we prioritize issues that they raise first, and then we prioritize Typesense Cloud users. And then if you're a GitHub sponsor, then we prioritize those issues. And also in parallel to that, we try to also balance it with any features that are commonly asked by the community. If there are a lot of asks for it, or if there's an issue that's affecting a large number of people, or if there's a particular user that we're super excited about that probably that we haven't thought about, or we've thought about and we've been waiting until someone else brings it up, like a user brings it up before we start working on it. I think those are the features that we also balance with the first set of users that ask us for features. So I'd say, of course, besides prioritized support and using Typesense Cloud and sponsoring us on GitHub, the other best ways to get a particular feature prioritized, I would say, is if first search for it on GitHub in our issue tracker. If you find it there, add your use case to it and say, this is how this feature would be useful to me. I think that context is very valuable for us, and that helps us prioritize particular features. And if there are a lot of people giving us interesting use cases for a particular feature, then that also excites us that it's going to be a useful feature. So then it rises up in priority as well. So given this style of roadmap planning, our release cadence also doesn't tend to be on a fixed cycle. It's not like a release train that you might typically see in other projects, or sometimes companies do this as well. So what we do is, when we accumulate a set of critical features over a month or a month and a half to 2 months, and if it reaches a point where the number of features are good enough and we think that this could be another major release, Then we put the code base on a feature freeze, not a code freeze, but a feature freeze, so that we don't end up adding any more major features. And then we let it kind of simmer and make sure it reaches enough of stability as different users are using it. We also publish release candidates every 1 to 2 weeks of all the features. And as these features are getting used by users and we're getting feedback with all the different release candidate builds that we put out, once we're confident that this build is stable and can be run in run by a majority of our users, that's when we then convert the latest release candidate into a generally available release and publish it on GitHub and announce it as a GA release. So which is why you won't find us, like, we don't do like monthly releases, for example. And this is part of the reason is we want to make sure every build has enough features that want to make you upgrade to begin with, and it's also stable as we keep releasing or as we keep adding more features. So right now, for example, so I'd say v0.22 has been in feature freeze for about 3 weeks or so now, and we're like still working on some like last mile issues, and people have already started using the various RCs and have been giving us feedback. So we're working on fixing the last mile issues, and then once it's ready, then probably in a week or two, then we'll be publishing it as a GA release. And the other thing I would also add is that these like RC builds are not, even within RC builds, we still look at some level of stability. So the issues that you might run into RC builds are probably very specific edge cases that particular users run into. So I would encourage you to run the RC like even in production to see how it works for your use case, and then give us feedback based on that if things are working well or if you notice any issues on your particular environment or data set. So that's how we plan our roadmap and our release cadence. And then Kishore, do you want to talk about what's coming up in v0.22?
Sure. So one of the things that we are very excited about is the dynamic filtering. So we have overrides at the moment where you can say that we've given this search query, put these results on top or remove these results. All right. So kind of dynamic filtering takes it forward and says that for this particular query, add this filter. Right, which is really powerful because you can have something like some color shoes or something like that, and then you can say that if there is a yellow shoe, and then always add the color as a filter, right? So you can add dynamic filtering to your queries that kind of ensures removes the noise from your search results, because filtering always gives you removes the ambiguity in your results. Another thing that we have from the back end, from the infrastructure perspective, what we have really worked on is improving the performance of updates. If you look at updates, they will be at least 3 to 4 times faster. We have refactored our internal data structures to get that, and we also have spent a lot of time supporting parallel inserts. If you're having let's say hundreds of collections and you're always writing to all of them at the same time. Previously, it used to be single threaded. Now we kind of scale out and we are able to utilize all the cores and index multiple collections in parallel. There are a lot of small features that we have also looked at, for example, configuring our typo tolerance based on string length, and supporting searching of non-alphanumeric characters. This one is of course a much bigger feature. Previously what there was no way to if you wanted to index the symbols plus, or C++ has the characters plus, right? So there was no way to actually index the symbols. So we have started allowing that. So these are some of my most favorite features coming up. If you check out, I don't want to go into every one of them. There are quite a few there. If you can just check out the projects, and you can see what is coming up. While Typesense is really fast in lot of cases, there might be particular cases where if you would want it to be cached on the server side, because there's something that maybe people keep some popular queries that people keep coming across, there's no point doing the search over and over again. Even if it is fast, it just makes sense to cache it, especially if your data is not going to change that often. So we've added a feature for you to do server-side caching, where when you make a query, you can just say that, cache this query, and then you can give a TTL, a time to live, that says how long you want that cache to be available. So you can say like, okay, I know that I'm going to update my products only, let's say, every few hours. Then I can very easily cache my results like 30 minutes or 45 minutes, even without having there will be no decay in the data that is being shown to the users. They'll still be fresh because I'm not going to update my data set that often. So that's server-side caching. And we also have a nice circuit breaker feature, which we have added, which will kind of, let's say you have some queries that are really heavy, some queries involving stop words, where there is really no point going and searching all the records, because let's say somebody's searching for the word T or and, right? That's not really going to give very relevant results. So if you just want to say that, I do not want such queries to be running for a very long time, you can have you can mention circuit breaker milliseconds value that you can specify and say like, okay, don't run queries more than 200 milliseconds, for example. So what the Typesense engine will do is, okay, I'll keep running. Once I hit that cutoff value, I will stop at that point, and then I will produce the results. It's not a hard limit, because since there are so many things happening in the engine, there is no way to guarantee like a really hard limit, but it gives a hint to the Typesense. So if you mention 200 milliseconds, it might take just a little over, it might be take a little less, depending on how the actual search gets distributed. But it gives you a way to ensure that it doesn't run for like multiple seconds. That it kind of gives you that kind of guarantee too. The other thing I would talk about is the tokenization around, like, let's say you want to split words on hyphen or underscore. Previously, you had to split it beforehand and then like pre-tokenize your text before you kind of indexed it into Typesense. Now you can do this you can configure this on the Typesense. You can say that, I want to, these are the symbols on which I want to tokenize my words. So if you can have hyphen and underscore and like these common word separators, and then Typesense will do that chunking and then indexing them as individual words. This is also quite a frequently asked feature, which the only workaround previously was to tokenize on your own, which we have like moved away from. Now you can configure this and let Typesense do it for you.
Cool. All right, so that's V0.22, and then we've named it medium term, but we generally tend to pick items from this column for the release after the upcoming one. So in, say, V0.23, the biggest thing that we're planning to tackle, and this has come up several times now, is being able to do in-place schema changes. So today, if you need to change your schema, maybe you want to add another field that's a facet, you have two options. One is you could use auto schema detection and use a wildcard field and say anything that ends with underscore facet, for example, automatically mark it as a facet. So if you don't use auto schema detection, or if you want to change an existing field that has that was already indexed and now you want to convert it into a facet, the only other way is to then create a whole new collection and then re-index the data, and then maybe use the alias feature to then switch your application to point to the new collection. And what this feature is going to do is you're going to be able to do in-place upgrades, so you don't have to create a whole new collection. You can just change the schema for an existing collection, and internally we're essentially like re-indexing the data instead of you having to do it from your end. Then another interesting feature, again, we're surprised how many times this has come up now, is what's called phrase query. So that if you're searching multi-word queries, and if you put a quote around them, today, we don't look at the quotes. We search for Harry separately, and then we search for Potter separately in this particular example. But what this feature would do is essentially we'll search for the entire phrase, so that it'll only return documents where Harry and Potter appear right next to each other. So that's something that we're planning to add potentially in the next feature. Again, I would say these are two features that are highly probable to make it into the next release. And after this, depending on other things that might come up, or so many things that change based on all the things that I mentioned earlier, we'll then slowly start including it. So once this is released, you'll probably see us add another column saying v0.23, and anything that exists in that column is what is certainly going to make it into that release. So that's about the roadmap. So we have a question asked from Louise. He's asked, does Hacktober have an impact on issue activity commits on Typesense? So we did have very good contributions from Hacktoberfest, and I would say the biggest highlight is from our conversion of our JavaScript library into TypeScript. That was, that's been sitting around for several months now. And we had to, basically, both Kishore and myself didn't know TypeScript, so one of us had to pick it up and do it. And, I kept putting it off for a long time. And then we asked the Hacktoberfest community to see if anyone could help. And then actually before that, another contributor of us, Nick, had taken it almost like, I'd say 85% of the way. And then, to take it to the remaining side, then Damien from the community jumped in. We also had Adam as well helping in review stuff, and a whole bunch of other users give us feedback. I think we're almost ready to ship it out. So that was, I would say, a huge win from our from Hacktoberfest. And then the other, the other question is it possible to link Typesense with my HarperDB? So I haven't used HarperDB myself. As long as you can export the data with queries, you can run like a cron job to bulk insert it into Typesense. But I don't know, Kishore, if you've heard about HarperDB and have used it.
In general, the integrations are as with any other database. Usually the databases don't really allow you to have any hooks that you can write to another database. So the way you would do it is to have a synchronizing system that kind of queries. If, for example, MongoDB publishes change streams that allows you to listen to the writes that happen, updates, and so on that happen in real time, and you can use that to publish it into Typesense. With MongoDB, we have an extension, but I'm not sure whether HarperDB has that feature. If it exists, we appreciate community contributions. We'll certainly accept that.